Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where the air just feels heavier, like it knows something's about to shift. I had just gotten back from work, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and kicked off my shoes like I always do. Everything seemed normal at first. The house was still, but not in that peaceful way. It felt expectant, like someone was waiting. I walked toward the kitchen, and that's when I saw him. My stepson, Jake, leaning against the counter with that look again. The same look he gave me last week. The one that said too much without saying a word. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. Just locked eyes with me like he was reading every thought in my head. Let me be clear, Jake isn't a kid. He's 22. Independent. Strong-willed. And lately, he's been around more, helping out, asking deeper questions, noticing little things about me I didn't think anyone saw. It started with small gestures. Fixing the leaky faucet. Cooking dinner when I got home late. Sitting a little too close on the couch. At first, I brushed it off as kindness. But it didn't feel like kindness anymore. It felt intentional. Focused. Like he was watching and waiting for something. Tonight was different. He didn't speak when I stepped into the kitchen. He just moved slowly toward me, eyes never leaving mine. The kitchen light hit his face just right, and for a second, I couldn't look away. My heart picked up, not because I was scared, but because I knew something unspoken was finally going to surface. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't simple either. This was a line we hadn't crossed, but both of us were clearly standing right at the edge of it. I didn't know what to say. I could have laughed it off or asked him what he wanted. But I didn't. I just stood there, letting the silence say what we hadn't. The air between us was thick with questions neither of us was ready to ask, but desperately wanted to. What happens if we don't ignore it anymore? What if this tension isn't just in my head? If you've ever been in a moment like that, where someone looks at you and you just know, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had someone see through you like that? Should you lean in or walk away? Vote in the poll. Would you stay and see what happens or keep your distance? And just as I opened my mouth to speak, Jake did something that stopped me cold. He took a slow step toward me, and for a second, it felt like the whole house held its breath. I didn't move. I wasn't sure I could. Jake's expression was calm, but there was something underneath it, something I couldn't read completely. Not anger. Not joy. Just intensity. The kind that makes you question everything you thought was settled. He stopped just a few feet away, eyes steady on mine, and asked quietly, "Rough day?" His voice was low, gentle, but there was an edge to it, like he was testing something. I nodded, trying to keep it casual. "Yeah, long one." He nodded too, but didn't look away. "I made dinner. Thought you might be hungry." He motioned toward the table behind him where plates were already set, candles flickering. I hadn't even noticed them when I walked in. That's how off balance I was. I wanted to ask why. Why he went to all that trouble. Why he was looking at me like that again. But I already knew. Part of me had known for a while now. This didn't just come out of nowhere. It built over months, quietly, slowly, until it became impossible to ignore. After his dad and I divorced, Jake and I stayed in touch here and there. It wasn't weird. At first. But last year, when he moved back to the city and asked if he could crash at my place until he got settled, I didn't think twice. He was always respectful, helpful, easy to talk to. He brought calm energy into the house, and I'd been needing that. I just didn't expect him to see me the way he did. Not just as someone older, but as a woman. The first time I noticed was during a movie night. We were sitting close, sharing a blanket. He didn't move away when our legs touched. Neither did I. There was a pause in the movie, some long romantic scene, and I caught him watching me out of the corner of my eye. Not in a creepy way. Just observant. Curious. Like he was wondering if I felt it too. Since then, little things kept happening. Long stares. Inside jokes that felt more personal. A certain tone when he said my name. And tonight, this whole setup, it felt like a moment that had been building. But the scariest part? I didn't want to run from it. He sat down at the table and waited. No pressure. Just waited. Like he was giving me the space to choose. I stood there, heart pounding, thinking maybe this was the moment where everything shifts. Should I sit down? Should I ask him what this really is? Should I admit I've noticed too? Let me know in the comments, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you keep pretending not to see it? Or would you face it head on? Just as I reached for the chair, Jake looked up and said something I wasn't expecting. Why do you always look surprised when I do something nice for you? Jake asked, his voice calm, but there was something pointed in his words. He didn't say it like a joke. He said it like he'd been waiting to ask. I froze for a second. Maybe it was the way he said you, like it meant more than just a polite question. I sat down slowly, my fingers brushing the edge of the napkin, trying to steady myself. I guess I'm just not used to it, I said honestly. People doing things for me without wanting something in return. He tilted his head, studying me. Maybe that's the problem. The air felt thick again. That kind of silence where every little movement feels louder than it should. I focused on my plate, not because I was hungry, but because I didn't trust myself to look at him. We started eating in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like both of us were working up to something. There were questions hanging between us, unspoken, but loud. Jake finally broke the quiet. You know, I've had a lot of time to think this past year. About what I want. What I don't want. He looked at me then, full eye contact. I'm tired of pretending I don't notice what's right in front of me. I swallowed hard. Not just food, everything. Every doubt, every what if, every voice in my head telling me this was complicated. Because it was complicated. There's an age gap. There's history. There's the fact that his dad used to be my husband. Even if that chapter was long closed, even if Jake had been an adult when it happened, there were lines here. And neither of us were pretending they didn't exist. But there was also something else. The way he looked at me didn't feel wrong. It felt honest. And that was rare. As I sat across from him, I remembered something he said months ago, something small, but now it echoed louder. We'd been watching a show where one of the characters went after something completely unexpected, and I'd said, "That's bold." Jake had looked at me and said, "Sometimes bold is the only way to get what you want." Was he talking about that moment? Or was he talking about this? A small subplot was beginning to form in my mind too. My friend Tasha had asked about Jake the other day. She noticed the way he opened the car door for me, the way he stood a little too close. She raised an eyebrow but didn't say much. I brushed it off at the time, but now I wondered, did she see what I didn't want to admit? Now I'm asking you. Do you think Jake's being too forward, or is he just being honest? Should I keep the wall up, or see where this is going? Drop a comment and tell me what you think is really happening here. And just when I thought dinner would end quietly, he put down his fork, leaned forward slightly, and said something that changed everything. Jake leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, his eyes never leaving mine. "I don't think you see yourself the way other people do," he said, voice quiet but clear. "You walk around like you're hard to reach, but you've already let me in. You just don't want to admit it." My breath caught a little. I didn't answer right away because I wasn't sure how to. He wasn't wrong. I'd been guarded for years, always keeping people at arm's length, even the ones who tried to get close. Especially the ones who tried to get close. But Jake had slipped through without forcing his way in. Slowly, patiently. Like he knew I wouldn't open up any other way. I pushed my plate aside and looked at him, really looked. "Jake, this isn't simple," I said. "It's not just about what we want. There's history. There are people who wouldn't understand." He sat back slightly, his jaw tense, but his expression calm. People don't have to understand. They're not the ones living it. There it was again, that boldness. The same certainty he'd shown since this whole thing started. It wasn't aggressive. It was deliberate. He didn't chase, he waited. But that waiting had weight. And now it was starting to pull me in. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, like the sky itself was holding something back. The soft patter of rain against the windows added to the pressure building in the room. Jake stood up without saying a word and walked over to the sink, rinsing his hands slowly. His movements were careful, quiet, but the silence between us was screaming. I stayed in my seat, heart pounding louder than the storm. Then he turned, leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Tell me you don't feel it too," he said. "Look me in the eye and say none of this means anything." I looked up, met his stare. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was just waiting for the truth. But the truth wasn't easy. Because yes, I felt it. I'd been feeling it for months. The late-night talks. The way I started dressing a little nicer on the days I knew he'd be around. The times I found myself smiling just because he was in the room. It all added up. But admitting it would mean crossing a line I'd always promised myself I wouldn't even approach. And yet, here I was right at the edge. I stood up, hands flat on the table, searching for something to say that would make this all go back to the way it was. But nothing came. Jake stepped closer, slow, cautious. He wasn't pushing, just closing the space we both knew had already been crossed, in everything but name. The tension was unbearable. I didn't know if I wanted to step back or close the distance. If you were in this moment, would you risk everything to follow something real? Or would you walk away to keep things clean? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? And just when I thought the moment had reached its peak, he said it. Jake looked right at me and said, "He knows." The words hit harder than I expected. For a second, I thought I misheard him. But the look in his eyes told me I didn't. Everything around us seemed to go quiet. Even the rain outside felt like it stopped. I felt my stomach drop. "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "My dad," Jake said, voice steady. "He called me earlier today. Out of nowhere. He asked if I was still staying here. Then he said something weird, asked if you and I were getting along too well." I sat back down, my hands suddenly cold. We had been careful. There was nothing to catch. No proof. Just long stares, subtle tension, and all the things we didn't say out loud. But somehow it got noticed. Jake walked closer, pacing slowly now. I didn't say anything, obviously. I played it off. But I could tell he already made up his mind. "I think he's planning to come here." I stared at him. "Tonight?" Jake nodded. He didn't say when. "But soon. And if he shows up, things are going to get messy. Fast." The room felt smaller. Tighter. The walls weren't closing in, but it felt like the past was. The whole reason Jake was staying with me in the first place was because his relationship with his dad had fallen apart. Not over anything like this, over trust, money, old grudges. But now this would be the final nail. I stood up again, pacing in the opposite direction. "We didn't do anything, Jake." "Not really." He looked at me. "Not yet." That was the problem. Nothing had happened, but everything already had. And now someone else knew or thought they knew, and that changed everything. My phone buzzed on the counter and both of us froze. I glanced at the screen. A text. From Tasha. "Are you okay? Just heard something weird." I showed it to Jake. He frowned. "You think he called her?" "I don't know," I said. "But if she's hearing things too, this is spreading faster than we thought." A part of me wanted to throw the whole thing away. Deny it. Pretend we misread each other this entire time. That we were just two people under the same roof, caught in a strange coincidence of timing and emotion. But another part, stronger, knew that wasn't true. This thing between us wasn't just imagined. It was real. And now it had become a problem we couldn't ignore. So what now? Do we talk to him before he shows up? Do we act like nothing happened? Or do we face it head-on and deal with whatever storm comes next? What would you do in this situation? Hide the truth or confront it before it explodes? Drop a comment and tell me your take. And just as I went to respond to Tasha's message, the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, 3 firm presses, no hesitation. Jake and I locked eyes, and in that split second, everything we'd been avoiding crashed in on us. He moved first, walking toward the door with a quiet purpose. I followed slowly, heart racing, every step heavier than the last. When he opened the door, there he was. Mark, Jake's father, my ex-husband. Standing there soaked from the rain, wearing that same guarded expression I'd seen 100 times before, only this time, there was something different behind it. Suspicion, disappointment, and something else I couldn't read. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, shaking off the water from his coat. "We need to talk," he said, looking straight at me, then glancing at Jake. All three of us. The room felt instantly colder. Jake crossed his arms, but stayed quiet. I stood by the kitchen doorway, bracing for whatever this was about to become. Mark looked around the house like it had changed since he'd last been here. Maybe it had. "I've been hearing things," he started. "People talk. You think you're being subtle, but you're not. And now I have to ask something I never thought I'd say." He turned to me. "Are you and my son involved?" Jake took a step forward. "No," he said. "We're not. But we were about to be." I froze. My breath caught. He said it like it was nothing and everything. Just like that, the air in the room cracked open. Mark looked at him, stunned. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" he said, voice rising. "You think this is normal?" Jake didn't flinch. "No. I think it's real. That's the difference." Mark turned to me, his expression shifting from disbelief to hurt. "You let him stay here. I trusted you with him." I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't plan this. Neither of us did. It just happened." A long silence stretched out between us, the kind that changes everything. Then, out of nowhere, Mark laughed, short and bitter. "You know what the real joke is? I saw it coming. I just didn't want to admit it, because deep down I knew you were never really mine." That hit harder than anything else he'd said. Jake looked at me, confused. "What does that mean?" Mark looked between us, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and tossed it on the table. "Ask her. She's been lying longer than you think." Jake picked it up. "Read it." His expression changed slowly, like he was trying to make sense of something that didn't fit. "What is this?" he asked, looking at me. I didn't answer. Because I couldn't. Not yet. And that's when the twist dropped right as the screen fades to black. Jake stood there with the letter in his hand, eyes moving over the words again like he was trying to rewrite them just by staring harder. I waited, every muscle tense. Mark didn't say another word, he didn't need to. The letter had already said too much. Finally, Jake looked up at me. "So, it's true," he asked, voice low. "You were still seeing him after the divorce?" His tone wasn't angry, it was disappointed. Hurt. Not just by what the letter said, but by everything it implied. I nodded slowly. For a little while. It wasn't serious. It just took time to fully let go. Jake shook his head. "But you didn't tell me." "I didn't think it mattered anymore," I said quietly. "Until you showed up again. Until everything between us started to change." Mark exhaled hard, like he was trying to hold back something he'd been carrying for too long. "You always kept one foot out the door," he said, not to accuse me, just stating it plain. "And I guess now I know why." There was another silence, this one not full of tension, but of truth settling into place. Jake set the letter down on the table, gently. "I needed to hear that," he said. "Not for him, for me. So I could understand what this really is." I stepped closer to him, slowly, like every step mattered. "So what is this, Jake?" I asked. "Now that everything's out in the open, where does it go?" He looked at me, the same steady way he always had. "It goes where we let it. But it can't be built on half-truths. So, if this is real, if we're real, we start honest. No secrets. No more avoiding the hard parts." I nodded. "Then we take it slow. With clarity. With respect." Mark looked at us both, and for the first time that night, the anger seemed to fade from his face. "You're both adults. I don't have to like it. But I'm not going to stop it either." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Just don't mess each other up worse than I did. Then he was gone. The house was quiet again. Jake looked at me, softer now. You still hungry? I laughed a little. Not even close. He smiled and reached for my hand, not pulling me anywhere, just holding it. Gentle, clear, real. And that was the end. Not a perfect one, but one we could live with. If you've ever been in a situation where love, timing, and truth collided, let us know in the comments. Would you have made the same choice? Or walked away? And would you want to see where the story could go next?